This is Jump, Book 1 of the Robert March Chronicles, Chapter 9.
By the time we passed Mendocino, we were pretty confident we had made a clean getaway. Frank exited the highway and pulled into the parking lot of a Motel 6. I was pretty sure I was probably the most wanted man on the planet at the moment, so I figured it wouldn't be a good idea to go flashing my face around in public, even with Frank's magic glasses. So he went into the office and checked us in. We found our room and settled down for what was left of the night. I was asleep before my head hit my pillow, bringing a blessed end to the longest and strangest day of my life. We awoke around 6 the next morning. Frank brewed a pot of coffee as I watched the morning news streams.
Action 5 News in the Morning, your #1 source for Bay Area news, sports.
The shootout in Santa Clara hadn't made the news yet, but I wasn't really surprised considering the entities involved.
San Francisco's recovery from the throes of the Kalen pandemic is one of the worst in the country.
It was obvious that we were dealing with some very powerful organizations here, powerful enough to suppress whatever needed suppressing until the time was right. We were on the road by 6:30 with a 10-hour drive ahead of us. I monitored the radio for any pertinent news as Frank drove. Still nothing concerning the shooting in Santa Clara. I turned it down and sat back in my seat and tried to relax. Tell me more about your time with the Colonel, Frank.
Okay, what do you want to know?
Well, I know everything up until the first split, right? So, pick it up from there.
All right, let's see. Shortly after the first split, you got promoted to captain.
You mean he got promoted to captain? I had left the service by then.
Yeah, right. This was December 2019, I think. Around that time, anyway. He took over as CO, and Alan got promoted to major.
I was starting my life as a civilian by then. So, what happened to Alan?
He left, but he showed back up just a couple of months later. It was strange. When he came back, he didn't really seem to have any particular duties on post anymore. Didn't seem to report to anyone, never in any formations. His only job seemed to be working with Captain March.
How do you fit into the picture, Frank? How did you get caught up in all this?
Well, I was detailed to be Captain March's aide at headquarters. We became friends. He arranged my security clearance when they sent him to MIT, and had me assigned as his assistant. So, we went to Cambridge.
Sounds like a sweet little gig.
Nah, I hated that damn place. Cold, gloomy, made Frankfurt look like a tropical paradise.
What was he doing at MIT?
I have no idea, sir. I know it was some high-level stuff, though. Super secretive. It was just him and 3 professors, 2 men and this British woman. Not a normal classroom type of thing. Alan would come over from Germany every now and then, checking in on him. I never liked that guy.
I wasn't a big fan either. How long were you guys at Cambridge?
2 years, from 2020 to 2022. Then they transferred us to Fort Huachuca, the 31st Intelligence Battalion. I was glad to get out of Massachusetts, but it's a weird post. Bunch of spies in training out in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, Fort Huachuca is a bit of an acquired taste.
Anyway, right after our arrival, Alan comes in as battalion commander. And he brought in this Major Crane, as his S2. This was late 2022, if I'm remembering correctly. Captain March would spend a lot of time with Crane. They'd disappear into one of those lab/barracks they have there, sometimes for days at a time. When they'd come out, they'd have these long meetings with Alan. I think the captain was having second thoughts about his involvement in the whole thing by then.
What makes you say that?
Just a feeling I had. After the sessions in the labs, he seemed... depressed is too strong a word. Subdued, maybe. He just seemed to be, I don't know, somehow diminished when he'd get back. Whatever was going on in there seemed to be taking a toll on him, physically and mentally. And he began drinking. Never on duty. But it was a noticeable change in his behavior.
I've never been much of a drinker.
Right. It was a definite change. Anyway, right around then was the second split, and that created the other that gave you that device.
The one that had his head blown off in my face?
Yes, that one, Bob the Hacker.
So you knew him?
Sure did. Knew him well. He was somewhat notorious in certain circles in his timeline. One of the best white hat hackers around. Did very well for himself in that line of work.
Who killed him, Frank?
No idea, sir. That's all above my pay grade. I'm just a
foot soldier. I know Frank, but I have a feeling you aren't telling me the whole story.
Well, it's complicated. There's certain details that I'm not exactly clear on.
He clammed up at that. Something told me that it probably wasn't a good idea to push him on this, at least for now. So what happened after Arizona?
We went to Virginia. He got promoted to major and was reassigned to the Center for Army Analysis at Fort Belvoir.
What about Allen and Crane?
They turned up like a couple of bad pennies. This time they brought a civilian scientist with them, Watts.
My biggest fan.
Creepy dude, sir. I'm not sure what his angle was, but my feeling was he was up to no good. Both he and Crane were there when the third split happened.
So, that created Dr. March, right?
Yeah, and it must have made the powers that be happy because they promoted Allen to general shortly after that. Of course, that was in 2024 when Miller got elected and all hell broke loose.
Miller? Who is Miller?
Jacob Miller, the first third-party candidate ever elected president. He was a state senator out of Texas. Dark horse candidate, came out of nowhere.
Okay, Frank. You're blowing my mind here.
I know, sir. Our timeline is a bit different than yours.
Go on, Frank. What happened next?
The war.
War? With who?
China, in the South Pacific.
Holy crap.
Yeah, not good.
What was the cause?
Well, when he got in office, Miller reignited the trade war with China in a big way, right off the bat. He pretty much threw down the gauntlet. China retaliated by banning all imports from the U.S. Things escalated until China finally abandoned the dollar. Before anyone really realized what was happening, we had boots on the ground in Taiwan. Apparently that was the last straw for the Chinese government. They attacked our post in Tainan City. Conventional weapons, thank God. We mobilized. Robert was assigned to Cyber Command East, operating out of New Guinea. That's where he was wounded during the Battle of Manokwari.
Just then I heard something on the radio that damn near made my hair stand on end. I turned up the volume.
Repeating. The FBI has named Dr. Robert March as a person of interest in the deaths of 3 men at the March Institute in Santa Clara, California, late last night. The circumstances surrounding the incident are unclear, but one of the men killed, Benjamin Lewis, was an agent for the Department of Homeland Security. The names of the other 2 have not been released. Dr. March is the founder of the March Institute and is best known for his discovery of the March vaccine earlier this year. The FBI asks that if you have any information regarding his whereabouts, please contact the agency at 800-555-7372. Send email to tips@fbi.org. In other news, cleanup is still underway following...
I turned the volume down on the radio and looked over at Frank. He gave me a side glance, then returned his eyes to the road and said nonchalantly,
That was expected, of course.
I knew he was right, but as I studied his face, I could see a deadly seriousness in his eyes. I turned away and looked out my window. We rolled on towards Portland in silence.
You've been listening to Jump, Book 1 of the Robert March Chronicles. For more information, visit therobertmarch.com.